So again, just to let you know, today class will end at 11:15, and I will have to leave, so we won't have our usual QA at the end. So if you have questions or comments, feel free to email me, or we can always talk next week. Today I wanted to talk about this idea of cultivating a better inner voice. A better inner voice. And I don't mean that as a striving activity or a right and wrong commentary, because better can imply that whatever is here is no good. But something that we'll see. Maybe I can offer some insight, if it might be useful. We'll veer off into a Buddhist teaching and veer back, perhaps. But it's something that's been occupying my mind a lot, so I wanted to offer it up to you. And what I notice is that a lot of people, not most, I don't know what people are thinking, but it appears from the outside that a lot of people aren't aware of what's going on inside of them. And I notice this because I notice a lot of reactivity. I notice this because in my own experience, the outside world is very loud, especially when things become uncomfortable. Or when we want things to be more comfortable, the exterior can be so noisy and so demanding. And also our culture is very externally focused, I would say. So there's just culturally, there's a bias towards satisfying this misguided idea that we can satisfy our needs from the outside as opposed to from the inside. But meanwhile, everyone here is a meditator. So I'm quite sure you're growing your awareness of your inner experience. And so how do we grow this inner experience? We work on this in class in different ways. The Buddha's instructions were one of his greatest teachings, the Satipatthana Sutta, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. He instructs us to investigate the body, the heart, and the mind, and the dhammas, the phenomena, the life, as a way to get insight into our inner world. So when we're investigating in class, we're investigating our own body, and you're doing this outside, how does this body react to these external stimuli, from our 5 senses? Like we try to tune into that, to become more familiar, so we're not just kind of running away from things, but how does this body react? How does it feel to be alive in this body? With the heart, Buddha was less about emotions and more just about the feelings. What feels pleasant right now in my experience as you're sitting right here? Like, what about my existence right now is pleasant? What's unpleasant? What's neutral? Like we're like an experimental laboratory as meditators, right? And then the mind, we're investigating our mind. And when we sit in meditation, my hope is that as you're trying to settle in on different anchors, then your mind goes off. You're like, hey, where'd you go? What are you up to? Oh. So we develop this capacity to sort of investigate what's happening instead of just having it be one big tangle. And so what happens is, and I've heard this many times and I've experienced it myself, is when you connect with this sort of inner awareness, there's like usually an unfriendly presence involved somewhere in there. There's an unfriendly presence in there. And, in my I have a very creative mind. I tend to think of it as like kind of a character on this inner stage. But however it comes up for you, unfriendly presences are stressful. And this is whether they're someone else who's just walked into the room or if it's one of those that's kind of swirling or tangling around inside of us. So, yeah, it's stressful. It's like self-critical. It's the harsh inner voice. I'm sure you've heard this spoken of. It's this harsh inner voice. And it really believes it's helpful. You believe it's helpful too. And honestly, it is at times. But it's like it's like a surface helpful. And we do this practice because we're looking for something more lasting, more satisfying, more reliable, more happy, I guess, more solid. And this harsh inner voice that can so often show up, it kind of reminds me of my freshman high school track coach. He was ex-military, and he would berate us and shout at us. And I quit after one season. I wasn't a fan. And the point is, I guess, that we can deal with a bad coach. We all can, because we're here. We're doing fine. But we can flourish with a good coach. And, I want to just talk a little bit about this idea of an inner voice being, how it can be the potential for it to be a good coach, for the potential for it to be like a wholesome presence that we can cultivate. We can cultivate that wholesome presence by setting our intentions on it, by saying, hey, you know what? I would benefit from a better, a kinder, a more compassionate inner voice. So, there's three things based on the practice of mindfulness and meditation. There's three things that come to mind very quickly when, if you were to ask, like, what would you say, what are the characteristics? How do you know if a voice is a nourishing inner voice? And the three things that come up are, number one, it listens carefully to you. So this presence inside of you is listening carefully to you. That takes a lot of patience and a lot of practice to listen instead of kind of running away. So listens carefully. Number 2 offers empathy or compassion. So kind of relates to you. Kind of says, you know how when someone's like, oh, wow, I feel for you. Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. You know, when there's somebody in your life who's done that for you, maybe, oh, I can appreciate that. You might not agree with it. You might think it's going down the wrong track. But there's a moment there where it's like, yeah, oof, ouch, yeah. So number 2, it offers some kind of empathy or compassion. And number 3, it encourages you wisely, gently. It offers some kind of encouragement for you to sort of prevail. And for each of us, of course, these qualities come out very uniquely because of the causes and conditions of our own individual lives. But these 3 components, this listening, this empathizing, and this encouraging, these are the qualities of an inner voice that can really, really nourish you. I'll give you an example. Because for me, this inner voice does show up. Not always, definitely not always. But when it shows up, it's very obvious. It's like, wow, where did you come from? And thank you. So an example of that would be on Monday, I taught a class at the halfway house that was really rough. And it was rough in large part because one of our students OD'd last week and died. And so the reaction to the reaction of this group that have been living together with this person, there was a lot of layering up, a lot of armoring, and a lot of avoiding, and a lot of tough guy attitude, which, boy, that seems about right. But the class for me did not go well. And it became even, the first half of the class went well, meditation went well, there was some connection. And then I myself felt overwhelmed and had to run away from, like inside. And I also was mirroring a lot the students in the class. And so, that's kind of what happens. So it was a little beyond my tools. But at the time, became very uncomfortable. Just really wanted to run away from that. So, and a lot of beating up did happen until the voice came in to comfort me. So the first voice that came in would have been the high school track coach. What were you doing? Why did you do that? Why didn't you check in? Oh, that went on for a while. And then this gentler presence came in and said, oh, yeah, that's rough. Anybody would have a hard time with that. She listened carefully. Like, what happened? Like, can you just piece it back? Can you go back and just explain to me what happened? Like, can you go through the different moments? And was there any parts of it that were good? Kind of like a therapist. And then she was kind of like, don't worry. You'll have plenty more classes. Things will be different next week. Like that. Call someone. The voice was like, why don't you call somebody really nice? Like, no, don't call that person. Oh, definitely don't call him. Oh, yeah, call her. She'll have some sympathy for you. I recently heard a teacher share a personal story, and she was talking about what's known as the 7 factors of enlightenment. Has anyone here gotten familiar with this idea? Yeah, it's a bit new to me as well, these 7 factors of enlightenment, and it sounds very intellectual and very unattainable. Um, Enlightenment, that's what the Buddha achieved. This sort of perfect and unshakable happiness. It feels so unreachable. Enlightenment. So why would I even want to know about the 7 factors of enlightenment? But you do know what enlightenment feels like. You have tasted it. You know what it is. It's that feeling of release, like you've been worrying about something or going over something in your head, and suddenly something inside of you is like, it's time to put this down. Like, I know you've had that experience before. Like, you've just some kind of revelation. You're like, you know what? I need to put this down now. And that mental process of setting something down, to releasing your grip, that is nirvana. That is enlightenment. Even now, when you're sitting here, maybe you're thinking about this and that, and you are able to just come into your body and sense the back of your legs on the chair, and all your attention is there, or in your breath, and you've released all these worries just for a moment, that is a taste. So you know what enlightenment feels like, and until we're all perfect Buddhas, we got to go on that. We try and get ourselves these moments because they're nourishing and they restore us. And the great thing is that the Buddha's teaching this 7 factors of enlightenment or awakening, they can be applied to all these small moments in our lives. So, and I think they are designed for the small moments, and we just basically build these small moments until we have, a big pile of them, I guess. That's been my process anyway. Anyway, I'll just read to you the 7 factors of enlightenment, and you can put this into your mental hopper. There won't be a test on it, so don't worry. The 7 factors are, and these factors conduce to enlightenment. And Buddha said they are a protection against pain, against disease, against adversity. These 7 factors of enlightenment. So the factors are, number 1, mindfulness. Hey, we know how to do that. Cool. Number 2, keen investigation of the Dhamma, meaning investigation, curiosity. Is this pleasant? Is this unpleasant? What am I thinking about? What is that thought that keeps coming back to me? What is that thought that keeps bothering me? Investigation. Number 3, energy. Because it does take a little energy even to, for example, show up for class. You can't be in bed sleeping. You need to have a little energy. Number 4, joy. That's nice and interesting. Okay, joy. Number 5, calm. Okay, calm. Number 6, concentration. Okay. And number 7, equanimity. Number 7, equanimity. So mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, calm, concentration, and equanimity. And so each one of these separately, to me, makes a ton of sense. Something, yeah, I want that in my life for sure. Yeah. This teacher shared it in a way that was more like an arc of a small moment in her life. And I found it so wildly helpful for me. It really, I've been looking at these 7 factors over time and just thinking like they're just these separate items. And she shared it in such an approachable way that I thought I would share it with you. It was kind of, and it was like this, inner voice, like this better inner voice that was there, helping her out in a tough spot. So what happened to her was she had an upsetting phone conversation. So she's in her house, someone called. She didn't explain, but it was something upsetting in this conversation. She hung up the phone and she was very upset. And she started stressing out about it. So she engaged her practice. So engaged some mindfulness. And decided to step out into the alley and pace up and down the alley, which would be walking meditation. And then she said she was thinking about it. She was investigating. She was using that energy. Just like, let me get outside and just walk a little bit. And then she said she turned her head up to the sun that was shining. And she felt that warm sun on her face. And just had this tiniest moment of joy. That feels great. And that one moment helped her to calm down a little bit. And she said after that, she was able to think more clearly. She was able to concentrate on the issue at hand as opposed to the stress that she was tangled up in. And eventually experienced some equanimity around the situation. So like she described it in this way that's like this arc. First I'm stressing out. Let me apply a little mindfulness. Let me put some energy here and go do something that might help. Let me turn to some joy. And how that can help. And it calms a little bit and then opens the mind, allowing more spaciousness. And at the end of her story, she said that she was able to go back and call this person back and have a better conversation than the first one that they had. So, I'm looking at the time, but I wanted to share that with you. This idea of cultivating a more supportive inner voice for yourself. Listen to yourself with all your heart and offer yourself some real compassion. Like, set aside the harsh one. They're always going to be there, so don't worry about them not keeping you on track. They will always be there. Cultivating this compassionate one, and then encouraging yourself with some wisdom that you might collect along the way as you're being more gentle and compassionate. So I wanted to offer that to you. I'll end there, and we can pick it up again next time. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your presence.